My name is Natalie. I'm 46 years old and I build custom steel smokers and outdoor fire pits in rural Tennessee. Not the cheap propane junk you grab from big box stores, but heavy, precision-welded pieces that serious barbecue people treat like sacred objects. My hands are permanently stained with grease and steel dust. I stopped trying to scrub it off years ago. It's proof I build things. Real things that last. Up until about a month ago, I thought my marriage lasted too. My husband Logan worked corporate marketing for a tech company with one of those AI-generated names that sound important but don't actually mean anything. He was charming, polished, a man who could talk in perfect sentences while saying absolutely nothing. He handled cocktail parties and corporate events. I handled fire, metal, and work that burned your arms and paid your bills. I thought we balanced each other. For 5 years, though, I stopped being invited into his world. I didn't fit the culture, he said. My jokes were too blunt. My presence made his colleagues uncomfortable. So I stayed home. I worked. I raised our kids. I told myself this was normal. Healthy, even. Until the night he suddenly needed me at his company party. Not wanted. Needed. That should have been my first warning. The hotel ballroom glittered with wealth that made my teeth itch. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors. People dressed like they were auditioning for a lifestyle I never asked for. Logan transformed the moment we walked in, laughing louder, touching arms, performing a version of himself I barely recognized. And then she appeared. A woman named Blair, smooth, confident, expensive in a way I wasn't. Logan lit up when he saw her. Not the polite smile he gave me lately, but something electric, familiar, intimate. I felt it in my stomach before my mind could catch up. 10 minutes later, Blair flicked a single dollar bill across the table toward me and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take good care of him tonight." The room exploded with laughter, including my husband's. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Quietly, cleanly, permanently. And I didn't yet realize it would cost him everything. If you'd asked me a year ago what my life looked like, I would have described it the way people describe a house they've lived in too long. Sturdy, familiar, a little worn around the edges, but still home. I'm Natalie, 46. I run a custom steel fabrication business out behind our house, one big metal building that smells like motor oil, hot steel, and smoke that clings to your hair no matter how many showers you take. The concrete floor is scarred with burn marks and dark stains from decades of work. There's a radio in the corner that only plays classic rock because I refuse to weld to music that sounds like a computer having a breakdown. I started welding young. Not because I had some romantic dream of craftsmanship, but because I liked the honesty of it. Metal doesn't lie. A bad weld snaps. A weak joint shows itself. You can't talk your way into steel holding together. You either did the work or you didn't. That's always been my comfort. If I put my hands into something, I can make it real. That's also why I fell for Logan. I met him when I was 24, and he was everything I wasn't. Clean, articulate, polished. He could walk into a room and make strangers feel like they were his closest friends. He had a laugh that filled space, a grin that made people lean in. And when he talked to me, he talked like I was fascinating, like my grease-stained hands and my rough edges were proof of character instead of something to hide. We didn't come from the same world, but we were obsessed with the idea that we could build a life that belonged to us, not our backgrounds. In the early years, our marriage felt like teamwork. I worked long hours, but so did he. I grew my business from a garage setup into a legitimate shop. He climbed ladders in corporate marketing, new titles, bigger paychecks, shinier business cards. He liked telling people what he did. I didn't. I liked doing my work, seeing the finished product sitting heavy and solid in front of me. We had 4 kids, each one arriving like a new season of life that demanded different parts of us. Ryan, 19 now, was the first. Tall, sharp-eyed, the kind of kid who always seemed older than his age. He's heading to trade school soon, and it makes me proud in a way I can't properly explain. Like he understands that real skills are a kind of freedom no one can take from you. Then we had the twins, Carter and Emma, 16. They're in that stage where everything I do is embarrassing until they need a ride, money, or someone to fix something they broke. Carter thinks he'll be a professional gamer. Emma lectures everyone about the planet while taking showers long enough to cause a drought. And then there's Lily, 13, my baby. Still sweet enough to hug me in public, still young enough to believe I'm stronger than I feel. The kids are the only part of my marriage that turned out exactly right. And that's why, when things started shifting, I kept trying to excuse it. At first, it was small stuff. Logan stopped asking about my day. He'd come home, phone in hand, and his mind would be somewhere else. Even when he kissed me, it felt scheduled, like checking a box. When he talked about work, buzzwords, meetings, aligning strategies, words that slid off my brain like oil because none of it meant anything tangible. Still, I went to his company events. I put on a dress that didn't smell like smoke. I smiled politely while his coworkers asked me what I really did, like my business was a hobby I played at between grocery runs. I remember, "So you build grills?" I smiled. Custom smokers, fire pits, outdoor setups. Her mouth pulled into a half grin. That's cute. Cute. Like I was describing a craft project. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their approval, that Logan loved me for who I was. But around year 5 of our marriage, something changed. He stopped bringing me. Not every time at first, just certain events. "It's more of a work thing," he'd say. "You'd be bored." Or, "It's a networking dinner. It's not really your scene." Then it became consistent. No more holiday parties. No more corporate retreats. No more award dinners. And when I asked why, he gave me that polished smile. Gentle, reasonable, cutting. "You just don't fit the culture, Nat." The way he said it wasn't angry. That was the worst part. It was calm, like he was stating a fact about the weather. "You're too direct," he continued once, like he'd practiced the sentence. "And sometimes your jokes, they make people uncomfortable." I stared at him across our kitchen, my hands still damp from washing dinner dishes, and felt something twist in my chest. "Uncomfortable how?" I asked. He shrugged like it was obvious. "You ask people what they actually do. You make fun of the corporate stuff. You don't realize how it sounds." I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I just stood there, staring at the man I married, and wondered when my presence became something he managed instead of something he wanted. After that, I stayed home. I worked, I coached Little League, I took kids to appointments, I cooked, I fixed things, I kept our house running like a machine. And I told myself, opposites attract, this is normal, we're fine. But there were signs I ignored, because acknowledging them would have meant admitting a truth I didn't want. Logan guarded his phone more than he used to. He'd step outside to take calls. He'd smile at texts and tilt his screen away. He started caring about his appearance in a way that felt sudden. New cologne, haircuts more often, clothes upgraded even when he wasn't going anywhere special. When I teased him about it, he laughed. "What, I'm not allowed to look good?" I laughed too, because I wanted to be a wife who trusted her husband. Then came the night he walked into my workshop, my sanctuary, while I was finishing a custom offset smoker for a client in Atlanta. The torch hissed, sparks jumped. My arms were tired and steady in that satisfying way that comes from doing something real. "Logan's, hey," he said. I killed the torch and pulled up my face shield. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer that. He didn't even pretend. Instead, "You need to come to my company party this year." Not, "I want you there." Not it would mean a lot to me. Need. I stared at him, my glove still on one hand, my other hand resting against the warm steel. "For 5 years, I said slowly. You've told me I'm not invited." "I know. Different how?" He didn't explain. He just smiled that corporate smile, smooth, reassuring, empty. and a cold thought slipped under my skin. It's a setup. I should have listened to that voice. Instead, I nodded. I went upstairs, showered off the smell of smoke, put on my best dress, and tried to be the version of myself that Logan wouldn't be embarrassed by, because I still believed, stupidly, desperately, that if I showed up and behaved perfectly, maybe we could go back to the way we were. Maybe this party was a reset. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe, just maybe, my marriage wasn't already burning. And then I walked into that ballroom and met Blair and watched my husband's face light up like Christmas morning and felt my life shift into the beginning of the end. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't want to admit then. By the time that party happened, the marriage I thought I was protecting was already cracked straight down the middle. I just didn't want to see where the fracture started. In the weeks before the party, little things kept piling up. Quiet, irritating details that felt too small to confront, but too sharp to ignore. Logan had developed a habit of being absent while present. He'd sit at the dinner table scrolling through his phone while Lily talked about school, nodding without really listening. When I asked him something simple, "What time will you be home tomorrow?" he'd pause, like the answer required a meeting invite and 3 follow-ups. He stopped asking for my opinion. That was new. For years, even when our worlds felt separate, he still checked in. "Should we refinance? What do you think about this trip? Does this sound right to you?" Then suddenly, decisions were already made by the time I heard about them. "Oh, I'm going to be late tonight," he'd say while grabbing his jacket. "How late?" "Not sure. Depends." "Depends on what?" He never said. And there was Blair's name. At first it appeared casually, like background noise. Blair had an interesting take on the campaign. "Blair thinks we should pivot the messaging." "Blair's staying late too, so we'll just order in." I didn't react. I didn't want to be that wife, the suspicious one, the jealous one, the one who interrogates harmless work friendships. But something about the way Logan said her name bothered me. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't respect. It was familiarity, the kind that assumes closeness, the kind that comes from shared jokes and late nights and a rhythm that doesn't include you. One night I asked, casually I thought, "So who is Blair anyway?" Logan didn't look up from his phone. "Just a woman I work with." Just. "That word seems like you work with her a lot," I said. He smiled then, too quick, too practiced. "You're reading into it." That was another new phrase. You're reading into it. As if noticing patterns was a flaw. As if my instincts, honed from years of running a business, raising kids, managing real consequences, suddenly couldn't be trusted. After that, I noticed more. Logan, he started showering the moment he got home, straight past me, straight to the bathroom, like he needed to rinse something off before saying hello. And the lies, they weren't big. That was the problem. They were small, lazy, insulting. "I told you about that meeting." "No, you didn't." "I mentioned Blair weeks ago." "No, you glossed over her." "I texted you." "You didn't." Each one alone was nothing. Together, they formed a pattern that made my chest feel tight at night when the house went quiet. I tried to talk to him. Not accuse, not explode, just talk. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I poured us each a drink and sat across from him at the kitchen island. "Do you still want this?" I asked. He blinked. "Want what?" "Us." There it was, the real question. He laughed softly like I'd asked something ridiculous. "Of course I do. Where is this coming from?" I looked at his face, handsome, familiar, increasingly distant. "I feel like I'm standing outside my own marriage," I said. He sighed. Not in concern, in irritation. "Nat, you're overthinking again. Things are just busy right now." Busy. Another word people use when they don't want to be accountable. I wanted to ask him if he was seeing someone else. I didn't. Because asking that question changes things forever. Instead, I swallowed it. Like I swallowed everything else. The party invitation came 2 days later. "You need to be there," he said again, firmer this time. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "Because people are starting to ask questions." There it was. Not because I miss you, not because I want you beside me, because people noticed I wasn't there. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay in bed listening to his breathing, wondering when it became something I didn't recognize. Wondering if I was imagining things, or if my body already knew the truth my mind wasn't ready to accept. On the night of the party, as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting a dress I rarely wore, Lily appeared in the doorway. "You look pretty," she said softly. I smiled at her. "Thank you, sweetheart." She hesitated, then asked, "Are you and Dad okay?" My heart stuttered. "We're fine," I lied, because that's what parents do. She nodded, unconvinced, and went back to her room. That should have stopped me. That moment. My daughter sensing something was wrong before I'd admitted it to myself. But I went anyway, because a part of me still believed that if I showed up, if I smiled, behaved, proved I belonged, whatever was growing in the shadows would shrink under the light. Instead, the light revealed it. Revealed Blair. Revealed the way Logan looked at her. Revealed how small I'd been allowed to become in a room full of people who thought I was a joke. And when that dollar bill slid across the table, it wasn't just an insult. It was confirmation of everything I'd been pretending not to see. The thing people don't tell you about moments that change your life is this. They don't arrive with drama music or slow motion. They happen fast, quiet, brutal. And by the time your brain catches up, the damage is already done. The ballroom was loud, laughter layered over clinking glasses, music thumping just softly enough to suggest celebration without demanding attention. The kind of room designed to make people feel important simply for existing inside it. I stood beside Logan, my hand resting lightly against the small of his back, out of habit more than affection. He didn't notice. His attention was already somewhere else. Then Blair appeared. She didn't walk up like a stranger. She slid in like someone who belonged, like she already knew where to stand, how close was acceptable, which jokes would land. I watched Logan's posture change the instant Blair smiled at him. His shoulders relaxed. His face softened. His eyes did that thing, bright, engaged, alive, that I hadn't seen aimed at me in months. My stomach dropped. Blair was tall, effortlessly put together, wearing a suit that looked like it had never known stress or sweat. Her handshake was firm but performative, the kind people use when they're trying to establish dominance without saying it out loud. "Oh," she said, glancing at me like I was a footnote. "You must be Natalie, not Logan's wife, just Natalie." Before I could respond, she turned back to Logan. "Man, that presentation you gave last week," Blair said, grinning. "Killed it." Logan laughed, pleased. "Couldn't have done it without you." That sentence landed harder than I expected. They leaned in, talking over me, around me. Inside jokes, shared stories, names I didn't recognize. I stood there, smiling, nodding, shrinking. I felt invisible. I told myself to calm down, to stop catastrophizing, to remember that people at work often get close. Then Blair ordered drinks for herself and Logan, not for me. A small thing, but it burned. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. I watched them laugh, whisper, stand too close. Blair's hand drifted near Logan's shoulder, not touching, but intimate enough to be intentional. My heart pounded, slow and heavy, like it was warning me. Then Blair turned to me. She reached into her wallet with casual confidence, flicked out a single dollar bill, and slid it across the table until it stopped right in front of my glass. The sound was barely audible. The effect was nuclear. "Don't worry," she said, smiling wide, her arm settling near Logan's back. "I'll take good care of him tonight." For a second, I didn't understand what she meant. Then the room reacted. Laughter erupted, sharp, delighted, cruel. People leaned in, slapped tables, gasped theatrically. Someone said, "Oh my God, Blair," like it was hilarious but naughty. I turned to Logan. He laughed. Not nervously, not uncomfortably. He laughed like he was in on the joke. That was the moment my body reacted before my mind did. My ears rang. My chest tightened. My hands went cold, then steady in a way that scared me. I felt every eye on me, not with sympathy, but curiosity. What would she do? I stared at the dollar bill. It sat there, wrinkled and insulting. A physical measurement of my worth in that room. I picked it up, folded it once, twice, 4 times. My hands were calm. My voice, when I spoke, surprised even me. "Thanks," I said, looking Blair dead in the eye. "That should cover the down payment on your hospital bills." Silence slammed down like a dropped curtain. Laughter died mid-breath. Blair's smile faltered. Just for a second. Long enough. Logan's face drained of color, then flushed red. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I turned. Behind me, I heard Logan call my name. Sharp, panicked, performative. It sounded distant, unimportant. Outside, the night air hit my lungs like freedom. I handed my valet ticket to the kid at the front, tipped him too much because he looked nervous around my energy, and sat in my truck with the engine running, hands on the wheel, waiting for the rage to settle enough that I trusted myself to drive. The dollar bill burned in my pocket. Logan didn't come home that night. I know because I stayed awake, staring at the driveway like a fool who already knew the answer. At 3 a.m, I sat in my workshop wearing half my formal outfit and an old band t-shirt, welding steel with an aggression that probably should have worried me. Sparks flew, metal screamed, and my phone stayed silent. At 4:47 a.m, it buzzed. Not a message. A credit card notification. A hotel charge. The same hotel as the party. A suite. I took a screenshot. Then another. Then emailed it to myself. Because when your life starts falling apart, documentation becomes a form of self-respect. At dawn, just as the sky started turning gray, I heard his car. I stayed in the workshop. 5 minutes later, I walked into the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. Logan stood by the coffee maker, wearing another woman's suit jacket, and right there, clear as day, blooming against his skin, a hickey. That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't stress. This wasn't work. My marriage was over. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. I didn't scream. That's what surprises people when they hear this part. They expect yelling, throwing things, some dramatic explosion that justifies the betrayal by turning me into the crazy one. But I didn't give Logan that gift. I stood there in the kitchen, the early morning light slanting through the window, illuminating every detail I wished I hadn't noticed. His rumpled hair, yesterday's makeup smudged faintly on his collar, the unfamiliar weight of another woman's jacket hanging off his shoulders, and that mark on his neck, purple-red, fresh, careless, a signature. "Did you not sleep?" he asked, his voice oddly light, like this was just another Sunday morning. "Never went to bed," I said. He laughed, actually laughed, a nervous sound, thin and brittle. "I told you I'd be late. The party ran long, and then a few of us went to a colleague's suite to keep celebrating. I crashed on the couch." He gestured at the jacket. "Blair lent me this. It got cold." Cold. In a climate-controlled hotel. I looked at him for a long moment, really looked. At the man I'd shared a bed with for over 2 decades. At the person I'd trusted with my life, my children, my future. "You've got something on your neck," I said quietly. His hand flew up, covering it instantly. Panic flickered across his face before settling into something sharper. "Oh, that?" He laughed again, louder. "I must have burned myself with the curling iron. You know how clumsy I am." The lie was so lazy, it almost offended me more than the affair. I'd watched him get ready thousands of times. He never burned himself. Never. But instead of arguing, instead of listing facts like evidence in a trial, I just nodded. "Right," I said. "The curling iron." He turned away from me then, focusing on the coffee maker like it was the most important thing in the world. He started humming, talking about dry cleaning, about what we should make for Christmas dinner. Normal. He was performing normal like it might overwrite reality if he committed hard enough. I watched him pour coffee into his favorite mug, the one I'd bought him years ago as a joke. Watched him add cream, then sugar. watched him stir exactly 7 times clockwise because he believed counterclockwise stirring brought bad luck. I felt something inside me finally give up. Not loudly, quietly. Like a rope that's been fraying for years, snapping its last thread. I didn't confront him right then. I didn't demand explanations. Because in that moment, I realized something important. You don't confront someone who's still lying to themselves. You protect yourself. That morning, I decided the locks were changing. Not tomorrow. Not after a conversation. Today. I spent the rest of Saturday avoiding him while he drifted through the house, pretending to be confused about my silence. He slept in the guest room without me asking, which told me everything I needed to know. Cheaters always reveal themselves eventually. Sunday morning, I was up at 6, coffee strong enough to strip paint. I drove to the hardware store before the aisles filled with people who didn't know what they needed. There's something grounding about a hardware store when your life is unraveling. Shelves of solutions, clear labels, problems that can actually be fixed. I bought 4 grade 1 deadbolts, new handles, spent just under $300, the cheapest investment in my sanity I've ever made. When I was installing the back door lock, Ryan wandered out in pajama pants, hair sticking up like he'd been electrocuted. "Why are you changing all the locks?" he asked. "Home security upgrade," I said. He watched me for a moment, thought about it. "Does Dad know?" "He's about to." Ryan nodded slowly. "That's cold," but he smiled. "Want help?" We worked together in silence. He held hardware while I drilled. I handed him a new set of keys when we were done. "Don't give these to your father," I said. "I won't," he replied without hesitation. By the time Logan left for hot yoga that morning, every door locked solid. At 6:30 p.m., I heard his car. I sat in the living room with a beer I wasn't tasting and a book I wasn't reading. The keys rattled at the door. Once. Twice. Then harder. "Nat!" he yelled. "The key doesn't work." I waited. Then I opened the door. "What did you do?" he demanded. "Same thing you did," I said calmly. "I made a decision without consulting you." He tried to push past me. I didn't move. "You can't lock me out. This is my house." "Not tonight," I replied. "Maybe go stay with Blair. You seem comfortable there." His face twisted. Rage, embarrassment, fear. The neighbors suddenly found reasons to be outside. Logan lowered his voice. "You're being ridiculous. We need to communicate." "Communication ended when you turned our marriage into a group project," I said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You added another person without asking me." He stormed off. I closed the door, finished my beer, and for the first time in weeks, my hands stopped shaking. I thought changing the locks would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The real escalation didn't come with yelling or slammed doors. It arrived quietly, wrapped in legal language and entitlement, like a man who still believed he was owed access to a life he'd already burned down. Monday morning, the mail came late. I noticed because I'd been watching the street from the kitchen window like someone waiting for a verdict. When I saw the carrier drop a thick manila envelope into the box, my stomach tightened before I even stepped outside. Law firm letterhead. 3 pages. Demands. Logan wanted spousal support, a share of future income, equitable division of assets. And then I saw the line that made my vision blur. A claim to 50% of my business. The business he'd mocked for years. The one he called too blue collar for his image. The one he distanced himself from when it didn't photograph well at cocktail parties. Now he wanted half. I sat at the kitchen table, the house unnaturally quiet, and felt something shift again. Not break this time, but harden. I called Michael, my lawyer. He'd handled my contracts for years, watched me build my company piece by piece. He listened quietly as I explained everything. The party, the hotel charge, the jacket, the locks. Then he said something that made my pulse spike. "My wife saw Logan with another woman a couple of weeks ago. We figured this was coming. Of course someone had seen them. People always do." Michael brought in a forensic accountant named Jennifer. She wore a sharp suit and had eyes that missed nothing. When she shook my hand, she said calmly, I'm good at finding money people think they've hidden. We spread my financials across the table. 20 minutes later, she looked up. Natalie, she said, when was the last time you checked your business credit card statements line by line? I check totals, I replied. Why? Because your husband's been spending like royalty. She turned her laptop toward me. Over $43,000 in 6 months. Hotels, restaurants, spas, shopping. 13 hotel stays in 4 months. That's not business travel, she said gently. That's an affair. My throat tightened. Then she kept scrolling, and he's been moving money. Regular transfers from your joint account to another one. She zoomed in. BC Enterprises, LLC. The letters hit me like a punch. BC, I whispered. Blair. Already checked, she said. BC Enterprises is registered in Tennessee. Owner, Blair Cross. Consulting. It's a shell. Michael leaned back, smiling slowly. Natalie, he said. Where does Blair work? I swallowed. Logan mentioned something about outdoor products. Michael's smile widened. What's the full name of your company? Natalie's Custom Steel and Outdoor Innovations, LLC, I replied automatically. And the subsidiary you bought 5 years ago? Crossfire Outdoor Innovations. The room went very still. Jennifer typed quickly, frowned, then turned the screen. Parent company, Natalie's Custom Steel and Outdoor Innovations, LLC. Sole owner, Natalie. My heart slammed against my ribs. Show me payroll, I said. There it was. Blair Cross, Senior Marketing Director. Crossfire Outdoor Innovations. Salary, $95,000. Reports to Natalie. I started laughing. Not hysterically, not wildly. Just a quiet, stunned laugh that kept coming because my brain couldn't quite process the symmetry of it. The woman who'd thrown $1 at me. The woman sleeping with my husband. The woman spending my money. Was on my payroll. Michael shook his head in disbelief. We're not just winning this divorce, he said. We're setting a precedent. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. I sat in my workshop, staring at the framed certifications on the wall. The tools I'd collected over decades. The business I'd built with my hands. And for the first time since that party, I felt something other than pain. I felt control returning. Tuesday morning, I arrived at Crossfire's office early. I asked my assistant Qley to schedule a mandatory meeting for all division heads at 10. Make it sound serious, I said. No details. By 9:30, Blair's full employment file sat on my desk. Hired 3 years ago. Good performance. A few notes, nothing conclusive, but enough. Boundary issues with male coworkers. Overly familiar communication style. At 9:45, I took my seat at the head of the conference table. At 10 o'clock sharp, Blair walked in, confident, polished, leather folder in hand, until she saw me. Her face drained of color so fast, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Good morning, I said pleasantly. Please, everyone, take a seat. Blair hesitated, then sat 3 chairs away, hands trembling as she opened her folder. Blair, I said calmly, how was Friday night? The room went silent. She swallowed. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, come on, I said, pulling the folded dollar bill from my pocket and sliding it across the table. This yours? Our HR director gasped. I leaned forward. That's the dollar you threw at me, your boss, while joking about taking care of my husband. Blair's mouth opened, closed. I can explain. Don't, I said. Patricia, please bring Blair's file. I flipped through it. Company policy requires professionalism. Do you think throwing money at your employer and sleeping with her spouse qualifies? Silence. Here's how this goes, I continued. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. If you want to contest this, my lawyers will be delighted to discuss your financial relationship with my husband. Security appeared. Blair didn't fight. She couldn't. As they led her out, I felt nothing. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. You didn't tell me your wife owns my company, Logan said, voice shaking. I just got fired. Because of you. I deleted it. Because escalation works both ways. and his was just beginning. Power doesn't erase pain. That was the lesson I learned after Blair was escorted out of the building and the adrenaline finally wore off. I drove home that afternoon feeling hollow, like I'd just finished a marathon I never trained for. My hands were steady on the wheel, my mind clear, but my chest felt heavy in a way I couldn't shake. Winning doesn't always feel like victory when it's built on the ruins of something you once loved. The house was quiet when I walked in, too quiet. The kids were at school, Logan was gone. The air still carried the faint trace of his cologne, lingering in corners like a ghost that refused to move on. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the coffee mug he'd used that morning, the one I'd bought him years ago, back when inside jokes still existed between us. It sat in the sink, unwashed, like he'd assumed someone else would take care of it. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I sank into a chair and let the silence press in. That's when it hit me. Not the anger, not the satisfaction of justice, but grief. Raw, unfiltered, crushing. I wasn't grieving the man he'd become. I was grieving the man I thought he was. The version of him who used to sit beside me on the porch after long days, beer in hand, listening while I talked about welds and designs and clients who didn't understand craftsmanship. The man who once said he admired my strength, my independence, my refusal to be impressed by shallow things. Where did that man go? Or worse, had he ever really existed? That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, every creak sounding louder than it should. My phone stayed silent, but my mind wouldn't shut up. What if I'd missed something obvious years ago? What if my focus on work and the kids gave him space to drift? What if I wasn't enough, not soft enough, not polished enough, not whatever he decided he needed? Those thoughts are dangerous. They creep in when you're exhausted and vulnerable, whispering lies that feel logical if you're not careful. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and walked out to the workshop. The building was cold, metal surfaces biting through my clothes. I flipped on the lights, and the familiar hum grounded me. Tools hung where they always had. Projects waited patiently, unfinished but honest. I sat on a stool and buried my face in my hands. For the first time since the party, I cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just tears sliding down my cheeks, dripping onto the concrete floor. I cried for my kids, who would eventually understand why their family split apart, no matter how carefully I tried to shield them. I cried for the years I spent defending a man who didn't deserve it. I cried because even when you're right, even when you're justified, betrayal still hurts like hell. At some point, I felt the weight of exhaustion settle into my bones, and then something else followed it. Clarity. I lifted my head and looked around the workshop, the business Logan wanted half of, the life he thought he could take pieces from after burning the rest. Every scar on those floors was mine. Every tool, every certification, every contract. I built this. He didn't just cheat on me. He underestimated me. That realization didn't make the pain disappear, but it changed its shape. It hardened into resolve. The next morning, court day arrived. I dressed simply. No power suit, no performance, just clean lines and steady breathing. In the courthouse hallway, I saw Logan sitting beside his lawyer, shoulders tense, face carefully neutral. He looked smaller somehow, less sure. When his eyes met mine, something flickered. Regret, maybe, or fear. I felt nothing. Inside the courtroom, his lawyer painted him as the victim. A neglected husband. A man pushed aside by a wife too focused on work, too distant, too cold. I listened without reacting. Because when you know the truth, you don't need to interrupt lies. When the judge turned to me and asked for my response, I stood calmly and told it plainly. No theatrics, no venom. The hotel charges, the transfers, the affair, the jacket, the hickey. Evidence doesn't care about charm. By the time the judge finished reviewing the documents, the room felt colder. When the ruling came down, granting me the house, both companies, full custody, and ordering Logan to repay the stolen money, I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just closed my eyes for a brief second and let the weight lift. Outside the courthouse, Ryan let out a short laugh. "Well," he said, "that escalated quickly." I squeezed his shoulder. Sometimes truth does. That night, back in the workshop, I stood alone again. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like space. Space to breathe. Space to rebuild. But before healing could begin, there was still one more realization waiting for me. One final shift I needed to make inside myself, and it would change everything. The morning after court, I woke up expecting relief to feel louder. A rush. A surge. Something cinematic. Instead, what I felt was quiet. Not empty, just calm in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The house was mine now. Not just legally, but emotionally. No tension humming in the walls. No waiting for someone else's mood to set the tone of the day. I made coffee and drank it slowly at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the floor like it had permission again. That was when it hit me. For years, I'd been shrinking myself to preserve something that was already gone. I wasn't just recovering from betrayal. I was reclaiming space. Later that day, my phone rang. Logan's name lit up the screen. I let it ring, then ring again. Finally, a text followed. "We need to talk. Please. This is getting out of hand." Out of hand. As if he hadn't been the one pulling threads until everything unraveled. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Because my turning point wasn't firing Blair or winning in court. It was realizing I no longer needed Logan to understand anything for me to move forward. That afternoon, Jennifer called with final numbers. Clean, thorough, documented. "There's nothing left for him to contest," she said. "He tried to position himself as dependent. It didn't hold." "Good," I replied, and meant it. That evening, Lily sat beside me on the couch, her knees tucked under her, quiet in the way only children are when they're thinking deeply. "Are you sad?" she asked softly. I considered the question carefully. "A little," I said, "but not the way you think." She nodded like she understood more than she let on. "Dad messed up," she said. "Yes," I replied. "He did." She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "But you're still you." That was it. That was the truth I'd been circling, but hadn't named. I was still me, the woman who built something from nothing, the mother who held her family together, the person who didn't need applause to know her worth. That night, I went out to the workshop and pulled out a notebook I hadn't touched in months. I flipped past old measurements, sketches, half ideas. Then I wrote a title across a blank page. The Legacy Collection. Not for revenge. Not for spectacle. For permanence. High-end builds. Limited runs. Engraved pieces. Quality so undeniable that no one could ever call it cute again. At 2 a.m., I called Ryan. "I've got an idea," I said. He laughed sleepily. "This sounds dangerous." "It's ambitious," I corrected, "and I want you in." By morning, we had a plan. Not just a product line, but a statement. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. That was the turning point. Not when I proved Logan wrong, but when I stopped needing him to matter at all. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It spread, quiet, efficient, unavoidable, like truth always does when it's finally free. Within days of the court ruling, Logan's carefully built world began to collapse in places he couldn't control. Word travels fast in corporate circles, especially when money and reputation are involved. The same people who once laughed at Blair's joke stopped returning Logan's calls. Meetings were postponed indefinitely. Invitations dried up. Silence replaced access. The tech company he worked for placed him on administrative leave while they reviewed ethical concerns. It sounded professional, bloodless, but everyone knew what it meant. No one wants scandal standing next to their brand. Blair vanished almost immediately. Florida, according to someone who still had access to internal gossip. Her consulting firm dissolved as quietly as it had appeared. Websites went dark, phone numbers disconnected. Funny how confidence evaporates when it's no longer subsidized. Logan tried again. Emails this time. Longer. Emotional. "I never meant for it to go this far. You humiliated me. We both made mistakes. We." That word again. trying to split responsibility like an asset. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, because there was nothing left to negotiate. The kids noticed the shift before anyone explained it to them. Ryan, practical as always, adapted quickly. Carter asked fewer questions than I expected. Emma was angry, at him, not me. Lily just stayed close, her presence quiet but constant. One night at dinner, Carter said, "So, Dad's really not coming back, is he?" I set my fork down. "No." He nodded once. "Okay." That was it. Kids don't need perfect explanations. They need honesty that doesn't shake the ground beneath them. Logan's family tried, briefly, to intervene. A phone call from his sister. A message from his mother suggesting we keep things private and work it out. I declined, politely. Privacy is a privilege for people who don't create damage. When the house finally felt settled, no tension, no waiting, I allowed myself something I hadn't in months. Peace. Work filled the rest. The Legacy collection launched quietly. No drama, no announcements tied to my personal life, just quality speaking for itself. The response surprised even me. 32 pre-orders in the first run, each build priced at $5,300. Sold out before the second batch was even finalized. Backlog jumped from 2 months to 8. Funny thing, Logan used to say my work embarrassed him. Now it was paying for stability, college funds, expansion. One afternoon at a gas station, the clerk recognized me. "You're the one," he said, grinning, "with the grills. Respect." I smiled. "Thanks." Someone made a meme online. "Respect the woman with grease on her hands. She probably signs your paycheck." I didn't share it, but I framed the dollar bill Blair threw at me and hung it above my desk. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. 6 months later, spring rolled in. Logan took a job at a smaller firm. Less money, less prestige. Blair never resurfaced. The noise around them faded the way scandals always do, leaving only consequences behind. One evening, Ryan joined me on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the shop. "You handled all of that really well," he said. I took a sip of my drink. "Sometimes," I replied. "You don't need to fight fire with fire." He raised an eyebrow. "You just let people light their own," I finished, "and step out of the way." The fallout wasn't loud, but it was complete, and I was finally free to decide what came next. A year later, my life doesn't look dramatic, and that's the point. The house is quieter now, but it's a healthy quiet, the kind that lets you hear your own thoughts without flinching. Mornings start with coffee on the porch instead of tension in my chest. The workshop hums steadily, not with urgency or anger, but purpose. The Legacy collection became more than a product line. It became a philosophy. Build things that last. Don't cut corners. Let quality speak when words fail. Ryan works with me now, full-time. Carter still talks about gaming, but he's learning discipline. Emma argues with me about climate impact and helps design more efficient fire pits. Lily still thinks I can fix anything, and I hope I hold on to that illusion a little longer. As for Logan, I don't hate him. Hate keeps you tied to the past. I don't forgive him either, not in the way people expect. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending something didn't matter. It means accepting that it did and choosing not to let it define your future. Sometimes people ask me how I stayed so calm. The truth? I wasn't calm. I was deliberate. There's a difference. I learned that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up as silence, as preparation, as walking away before you say something that gives the wrong person power over your story. If there's one thing I want people to take from this, it's this. Respect yourself enough to notice when someone stops respecting you. The first time, not the 50th. Because love shouldn't require you to shrink. Marriage shouldn't turn you into background noise. And no one who throws $1 at your dignity deserves access to your life. That dollar bill still hangs framed above my desk. Under it, a small plaque reads, "Respect the woman with grease on her hands. She probably signs your paycheck." And every time I look at it, I don't feel anger. I feel grounded because I didn't lose everything that night. I found myself.